You'll be investigating thieves, misers, bullies, the most detestable collection of people that you ever meet. My podcast co-host, the girl with dragon tattoo, coming up next.
Haven't Seen It with Tim Sestito and Tommy Tevenet. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. Thank you all so much for listening today. This is a podcast where one of us is watching a movie for the very first time, and I believe this is both of us.
Yeah,
Girls with
never
Dragon
seen this
Tattoo?
movie. Never seen this movie. It's Fincher month. The Killer is coming out later this weekend.
It's already
So
out in
we
theaters. Can I just say I'm very disappointed. It got with Netflix. Not doing right from what I hear by this movie. My cousin saw it. He texted me about it. The Killer said like he was so glad he saw it in a theater. He felt like it just really added to that experience. And then I checked, and there is literally zero theaters in the state of Tennessee showing The Killer. And I'm like, gosh, like, damn, like I really want to see that in theaters, and I have not purchased a Netflix subscription after they decided to stop allowing sharing to kind of stick it to them. So maybe
I'm
uh,
still finding ways around that. It's weird with my Netflix thing because I use my mom's Netflix. It got blocked on my Roku, but it was working on my Xbox. And now it's the other way around where my Roku is working, but my Xbox is blocked. But regardless, yeah, like you're saying, like we talked before about how like the theatrical experience is so important. Like you see a movie and like I saw Halloween on the big screen for Halloween weekend. I've seen this movie hundreds of times, and seeing on the big screen was fucking terrifying and really add to the experience. So the fact that I'm probably gonna be watching The Killer for the first time in my apartment is a little disappointing in a way. Where like
so so just to add on to that, I saw Psycho in theaters on Halloween. I took Emily to the Franklin Theater to go see it, and she absolutely loved it. She knew nothing about it going in outside of like the kill scene, the shower scene, because
yeah,
everybody knows that.
yeah,
Um, and just like the dual personality split, like persona, like that twist like kind of blew her mind at the end. Like she did not know that
yeah.
was coming or see that it was coming. Um,
So
and and you're right. And then like Tommy, one of my key thoughts of the girl with the dragon tattoo was, wow, I regret not going to go see this in theaters in
yeah.
2011 because this would have like it was great on my TV, but it would have hit a lot harder and better if I saw
Oh,
it in a theater.
100%. I mean, it's just one of those things that you go to back and over and over and over again, where it's just like it adds so much more to us. I mean, the opening title sequence alone in this movie would have been
Yeah,
incredible to see in the big screen.
it was Bond-esque, just in terms of like all the visuals and stuff. Like it didn't have like the girls and like all that stuff, but it had that kind of like presence. And speaking of Bond, James Bond is in this movie as Daniel Craig.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I know we touched on the movies we saw in theaters. We typically just do a little recap of what we've seen recently. Did you see anything else besides Halloween, which we covered last year? Go check out that episode with the Cody Tucker show, who he's doing really well on Instagram with his reels.
yeah, he's doing pretty great. But yeah, also we covered Psycho just last week. If you have been following, so check out that too. But recently, I just had watched Mad Max Fury Road for the Film Trace podcast. I was guested on their podcast. Go check them out. That episode should be coming out soon. And this is the first time I ever rewatched Mad Max Fury Road. I saw it in theaters back in
Oh,
2015.
what a movie!
Amazing theatrical experience. And, like we were just talking, it's still held up, though,
Oh yeah,
on a home viewing. Because I put off rewatching it for years and years because I was like, I need to go see it again on the big screen. That's the only way I can watch this movie. And this time I was like, all right, I can't obviously find a random film screen in Mad Max Fury Road before I guest on this podcast. So I'm just going to go for it. And I was really happy to revisit it. Just such an amazing world. George Miller just really knows just like how to drop you in the middle of a fucking scene.
yeah. I don't want to take away from like I'm not shitting on just watching movies at home. I've actually really found that like, because the way the streaming services work is they compress the files so that way you can stream it. It's like
Mm.
the picture quality will go in and out, is kind of a big one for me. Like when I watch a movie, like when we did Mulholland Drive, like I had the Blu-ray, so I put the Blu-ray in. When I
Mm.
did that, I found that the quality is just so much better. Like it's not theatrical, but it's close enough to it. I found with the streaming services, I find the buffering issues. But yeah, Mad Max, it still holds up. It's an unbelievable movie. And I believe Furiosa is coming out in next
Within the
year.
next year, yeah, within the next year or so. So I'm really curious to see how it's going to happen. If it was like a one trick phony for,
Well, George Miller, he knows what he's doing.
yeah, I
And
think it'll be good.
it took like it's taken 9 years for the sequel to come out. So like, I'm sure there's going to be a production hell stories that
Yeah,
just come out about that one.
just like there
Um,
was for Fury Road.
I saw the Disney's The Haunted Mansion, uh, the new one,
Mm.
and it was a movie that happened.
So
Uh,
that's your
it was
overall.
it was fine. I guess it was kind like the coolest part was that like compared to the Eddie Murphy one, which I'm struggling to remember, but with this one there was a lot more homages to the ride and like there was just a lot of sequences that felt like it, but ultimately it just felt like another kind of cash grab name for Disney to try to like make money off of, which they didn't. They also released it in July instead of October, which is like legitimately boggles my mind in terms of maybe the worst release date scheduling I've ever heard. Like they
I think
released it a
the
week after Barbie and Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
The Haunted Mansion, which is just like, oh, this is like a light family like horror movie. We'll get in the Halloween spirit, and they released it in July.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the more and more I think about it, it's just really that they only really cared about like getting us on Disney Plus in time for
Yeah,
October.
that was what was
But
most important, but it's almost like they would have made probably they probably would have made their money back on the thing because the one thing I'm curious about in the fallout of like the Barbie Oppenheimer of like people that that aren't like film buffs being like, yeah, I actually went to the movies for the first time since COVID or whatever, going like, oh, like that was like a great experience, like I enjoyed that. Like, are people maybe taking steps back into the theaters for other stuff, and that feels like a movie that might have played better because I wouldn't say it was bad, it just wasn't personally for me, right?
yeah,
uh,
it just seemed like it was a typical family film. I mean, I'm sure it's better than any Murphy film.
yeah, I don't remember the Eddie Murphy one at all. I saw that when I was like
Yeah,
10
I
or
saw that in
11,
theaters.
whenever that came out. Yeah, I think my at my parents' house there's still we still have the DVD of it somewhere, but that talk about collecting dust.
Yeah.
uh that's that's sitting there. It ultimately wasn't for me. I didn't, outside of like very annoying product placement stuff that just didn't. They kept saying these brand names when they're communicating with ghosts, being like, "I picked up a pen and paper from CVS. Why don't you write on it?" I'm like, you didn't need to include CVS, and you're talking to a ghost from the 1700s. He doesn't know what a pen is. He knows what
just
quill and ink
just blatant.
is, which is that's fine. Like I don't, but like just having it, like it was just always constantly saying these things. And then there was one where they get Burger King, they're eating it in a car ride back, and it was literally just about uh crunchy jalapeno chips or something like that. And like that was the point of the scene. Added nothing. It was just straight product placement. I was warned about it. It was really bad though, and I don't mind product placement because it's usually good films can make it organic, and it's just kind of in the background, or it's a little tongue in cheek. Like Arrested
Mm.
Development always did that with the Burger King ones
Mm.
during the second season, where like they needed these big sponsors, so they just made such a big deal about it being at Burger King, right? And like wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah,
But yeah, I felt like it was fine. I don't ever need to see it again, but it was if
somewhat
you
enjoyable.
it's an enjoyable one for the family. If you have little kids, they'll enjoy it for sure. Um, but yeah, in terms of stark tonal contrast from Disney trademark The Haunted Mansion, uh, this is The Girl with the dragon tattoo.
I need a research assistant.
I know an excellent one, but she's different.
In what way?
In every way. She's had a rough life. Can we not make it any rougher?
Elizabeth, I want you to help me catch a killer of women.
They say I'm insane.
Why would you want to know about such an awful murder?
It interests me.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Rated R. In theaters everywhere December 21st.
So, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, it was that book that everyone read at the beach in the summer of 2009. Now, I'd never read the book. And just in terms of the movie, I'm very surprised this was a beach read, because there's a lot of like pretty graphic, intense sexual kinks, which I know, like 50 Shades of Grey, but like that was like a porn book, so like I think people like knew what it was. Like, this is like a thriller. It's not like an erotic novel, or nothing about it should be erotic to you. Believe me, nothing about that should be erotic about what goes on in this movie.
No. I mean, sometimes it is like one of those things with like beach reads, where beach reads end up being like kind of like fucked up murder mysteries or something like that.
Yeah,
and
I feel it almost makes me want to read the book, because I felt like Fincher was if I'm taking the movie, at least the beats and the plot points being pretty one-to-one. I know books and stuff are adept. I felt like Fincher is definitely the right guy to adapt that. I would say the biggest strength for this is the pacing of it. It's a long movie. It's 3 hours. It does not feel its runtime at all. And I would say, in contrast to Killers of the Flower Moon, where it's like, didn't feel its runtime, but it felt long. Like, this didn't really feel long, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the pacing was great, and like the character reveals and all that stuff. And it's crazy to think in this movie that you don't see Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara, the two leads of this movie, together in a scene until like midway through the movie, probably like an hour and like 15 or something like that into the movie.
I think it's like right before the halfway point of the movie. So if you don't know, and just to simplify the plot down, Daniel Craig's character Mikhail is a journalist who was recently discredited for publishing against this wealthy businessman. A different businessman whose family kind of built the industry in Sweden reached out to him to come write a biography of his life. It was played by Christopher Plummer, it's so good. It was giving me a little bit of
Knives Out vibes.
Knives Out vibes. I was like, for the original one. I wonder, a lot of directors will have like lists of film influences that they use, and it would almost make me want to go back and rewatch Knives Out and see if there's any like sequences, because they're totally very different. But like, you took Daniel Craig, put him as your lead, as your investigator, and then you had Christopher Plummer as like the patriarch of the family there. But Daniel Craig goes and is actually there to investigate a murder of a family member from over 40 years ago. And then we follow Elizabeth, who Rooney Mara plays. We follow her life, and then how he needs an assistant. She comes into the story because she had done the background search on him before this family hired him. And that's kind of the general synopsis of it. There's a lot that goes on in the first like 40 minutes before that even happens. Specifically with Elizabeth, I actually really, it's so nice when a movie just like lets you just understand who these characters are. And just like takes its time with it and get an understanding of who they are, what motivates them, what drives them.
The introduction to her character alone, I think, is like one of the best character introductions I've seen in a movie in a while, where it's the introduction of like her employer talking about her to like it's like one of his clients being like, yeah, so this is a person that like we don't really want to be in the office. I prefer for her to work from home because she's not really great with people and stuff like that. And there's pounding music going on now while she's you're seeing like the silhouette of Rooney Mara walking in. She's this like 80s punk style, like
Yeah.
full on mohawk, like goth and everything like that. Insane looking. She walks in and just like, here's the fucking character. Here you go. Boom. And her performance, I think, in this movie really drives it. She is just incredible in this role. I mean, this is a book that has been adapted before.
Yeah,
as
there's a
Swedish
Swedish
movie.
there's a Swedish film of it. Yeah.
And Naomi Rapace, who's been like Prometheus, and she ended up having a thing. And I'm sure she was fine in the movie, but I felt like the vibe from that felt cheap, like series for me. And
I've never seen it, so I can't like, I don't want to speak on it, and I also feel like I don't know anything about the Swedish film industry, Swedish film directors. Like typically with international films, they have their own style, their own pace that are just different compared to, you know, Hollywood and US films.
Yeah.
So I would have to watch it to really say like, oh, like it's probably just a significantly different movie. Because, you know, part of my thought was almost like they gave it, because it's very weird with Fincher, because he's coming out with The Social Network. That was 2010. Adapted with what's the guy, the West Wing guy?
Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin. You know, which is considered one of the 10 best films of the last decade, which and then he comes into this, and then it's this, you know, and my impression of it was that beach read book. So I didn't really like, at the time I never read it, so I didn't feel the need to go see it. So like kind of when it starts off, I'm kind of like, okay, like where's it going? And then like once I kind of got into it, I had the thought of like, what does this movie look like with like, if they just throw like a studio guy on it, you know, like a guy who he can make a fine movie. Like I don't even know the names, but like they're the guys that just kind of shovel out.
You're John Turtletop or whatever, the guy who directed the Meg. Shit like
Brett,
that.
Brett Ratner, just like one of those guys like that just kind of shovel out the schlock. Because like I can't imagine, like I was stunned when I saw that this movie grossed $232 million on a $90 million budget, because I was like, this movie had to have lost money. Like it's this beach read, and I guess it was just a different time in terms of like watching movies, because like the Netflix streaming like was just kind of getting its footing, but it wasn't on TV. You know, it was on your computer mostly. It wasn't on TV. So people going to go see it, like, you know, it makes sense in that regard, because it's one of those things where it's like, if this was the book that came out in 2018, right, there's no way people are going to see the 3-hour cut of the girl with the dragon tattoo. For
there's a very schlocky version of this movie that could have been made. I mean, like, definitely in the wake of this movie, we've seen a ton of like, you know, murder mysteries that like end up coming out that were very similar. Like I remember seeing The Girl on the Train, which was like a similar murder mystery.
Yes,
and that was just like, God, like that was not that good. I was like, okay.
I also felt I personally have a grudge when it's just like, what's the character's main deficit? Oh, she's a drunk, so she can't remember what happens to her. And I always find that's like, I just kind of
easy cop out right there.
I feel like that's just easy cop out instead of like clever, inventive storytelling.
Yeah. Well, you'll like this. They didn't end up making an like kind of a sequel / reboot of this in 2018, because apparently this didn't do well enough for Sony. Sony pretty much pitched this movie to Fincher, like, here's this book, Fincher, you can make your own franchise for adults, because like, you know, at the time, you know, even 2011 superhero movies were just starting, but it was like really most franchises were just like kid movies. And you know, this is a book that book series, and there's like three books written.
There's 2 other books.
There's 2 other books written by Stieg Larsson. Stieg Larsson actually had a heart attack before this first book came out, and then they just went off his manuscripts from there. But you know, the pitch of the Fincher, here's like your franchise, like you can make this into like 3 movies, and we could have easily seen like adaptations of the second and third books with Rooney Mara, with Daniel Craig, but apparently this didn't do well enough for Sony for them to do it, and it's kind of really tragic, because I would have loved to see more of both these characters. But anyways,
absolutely, and it's one of those where it's like, I don't know, it's an R-rated movie that, like, gave you some kind of profit. Like it's not, because I was always kind of surprised. I was like, and that was part of the reason why I didn't think this did that well financially. And then especially after seeing it, because it's a great movie, but it's not for casual audiences.
It sometimes is a rough watch, not in terms of like bad, but like in terms of like
Content.
dark material.
Dark
content.
material. So
Yeah.
part of getting to know Elizabeth's character, she's an orphan. She has a guardian. Even though she's above age, she's had drug issues, drinking issues, so she has a guardian who controls her finances. He has a stroke, and then she has to go to the state now on an allowance, and the guy abuses his power at first, requesting a blowjob from her. And then the second time when she needs more money, he rapes her, and it's vicious. I literally texted you when I was watching that scene, being like, "This is brutal." Like it was like it made my stomach churn, like, which is the appropriate reaction, but it was very visceral and very, very dark. And then she gets her revenge, where she goes, "Yeah, I am insane," and tattoos on his body, "I'm a rapist pig," and ties him up.
Yeah, it's really just visceral and in a way that just feels like skin crawling, realistic. I mean, like, the actor who played him wasn't like stereotypical, like, oh, like I'm a creep, like, or whatever, like that.
Yeah.
It felt more so just very like, fuck, this is probably what happens to so many people and shit like that. People just abusing their power.
Yeah, and it's not like this guy was in some ultra powerful CEO. He was like a state, he's like a government official, like middle level government official, who allocates funds to people that are getting a state, getting their money through the state programming and can't afford it, under like a guardianship, like the one that Britney Spears was on with her father. That's probably the similar equation, because it is set in Sweden. It takes all that in. Everybody just speaks English instead of Swedish, which is
Daniel Craig just decided, I'm not going to do a Swedish accent whatsoever.
I respect
yeah,
it. Like,
he respected, because he's probably like, I'm going to do a terrible Swedish accent. I mean, Rooney Mara, she is great in this movie, but her accent, I wouldn't say is Swedish, really. It goes in between like different like, dialects.
and for me, doesn't bother me. Robin Wright tries to do a Swedish accent, and it was like fine. It was fine. It wasn't great. But I'm personally, that was like The Last Duel, because Ridley Scott, Napoleon, coming out this Thanksgiving. Very excited to go see it in theaters. But they his last movie, The Last Duel, that was another criticism, because it was between the War of the Five Roses. You had French and English, and like you had Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and like neither of them did an accent, and people were very critical of that. And I'm like, I don't really want to hear them do. I don't want to hear Ben Affleck do. Like, I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was fun. I thought they were both pretty good in it. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm really glad they didn't do the accent, or maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know.
Well, because sometimes the movies, they could just take you out of the movie, where it's just like, oh, this is god awful. I mean, Rooney Mara, I mean, she does do an accent. Like I said, even though it does like switch between sometimes like different dialects, it didn't take me out of the movie and didn't really make it. But Daniel Craig, it's like, whatever, fine, cool. Daniel Craig just his movie star persona. You can just say whatever. You kind of had to laugh though, where like, Rooney Mara for this role had to go through so much shit. She got piercings like all over her fucking face, nose, her fucking nipples, even, which she said was like really kind of painful and shit. And Daniel Craig's like, you know what? I'm just not gonna do an accent. My take is that this guy's I'm gonna gain a little bit of weight. That's all I'm gonna do for this role.
Yeah, I'm just not gonna have the Bond six pack for this one. Oh, do you want to hear do you know anything about Rooney Mara and Kate Mara?
I know that their dad owns like the Giants, right?
No, so it's not their dad. So, and funny enough, Rooney Mara's name is, I think it's a stage name. So one of the Mara family owns the New York Giants, if you're not aware. The Rooney family owns the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Rooney Mara, right? In that, they have a rider in every movie that they are, Kate and Rooney Mara. They have a rider that says, if the Super Bowl is going on, and either the Steelers or the Giants are in the Super Bowl, like you were shutting down production because I'm not missing the Super Bowl. And this came out in 2011. I'm thinking film 2010-ish, maybe into early 2011-ish. Do you know who played in the Super Bowl that year?
The Giants.
No, the 2011
That was
2012
the
was
next
the
year. That was the
Giants.
next year.
That was the Packers Steelers.
Oh yeah.
So I'm wondering. I like couldn't find when it was exactly like the film timeline. But I had that thought. I was like, damn, I wonder if she shut down production.
I don't think that she had enough power back then to get away with something like that. Because I mean, like,
it's a writer. It's a writer.
Well, no, I get that, but I think that at the time, like, Fincher would have been like, "Fuck you, get off the fuck my set" or something like that. But because Rooney Mara at the time, I mean, like, really, what she was mostly known for was her brief opening scene in The Social Network from the year before. And for someone like me, she was the lead actress in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and she wasn't great in that movie. And that movie was awful too. So, I mean, really, this is her breakout role. She had to fight through so many fucking actresses just to get this role. I mean, like, this is a role when they announced that they're going to do this movie and Fincher was going to be directing it. Every fucking actress in Hollywood wanted to get that role. That was like, young actress. So Anne Hathaway auditioned, Scarlett Johansson, Keira Knightley, Jennifer Lawrence, Natalie Portman, Elliot Page, Kristen Stewart, all auditioned, and Rooney Mara was the one that somehow was able to jump through all the hoops. Fincher would tell her stuff like, "Oh, like, you need to go out and get wasted so we can see how you look like strung out," and she would do it. And he'd be like, "Fuck, I gotta do it," because he was thinking Erica Albright, the character she played in Social Network, is more of like a preppy kind of person, very different from this. And he's like, "I don't know if I see her as Elizabeth Slander," but she kept on going through all these different challenges and hoops for Fincher, and more he's like, "Fuck, she's the person for the role." And it's great that she's in this role, because if you had someone like those A-listers I was mentioning earlier, Anne Hathaway,
it takes it out of it, because Rooney Mara is like your B, C tier, in terms of like status. Like at this time, probably B, A, maybe now more C tier, but like C list, excuse me, but not in terms of her acting quality, just in terms of like status. But like Anne Hathaway's been like A-list since she's come up. Jennifer Lawrence, interesting. I feel like she's almost just. I think she's a great actress. I think a lot of times she falls into similar, like, witty characters. You know what I mean? Like, that's a little more quippy.
Yeah, her greatest strength is her humor, I feel like.
I think she pulls that humor card off really well. I actually think Anne Hathaway would have done a great job in this role. I just think that, like,
but you would have seen it and it'd be like, yeah, there's Anne Hathaway.
That's Anne Hathaway. Yeah.
And it's great in this movie when you get introduced to Elizabeth Slander. It's this actress that, like, maybe if you're like a film buff like you and me, like, you would have been like, "Oh, that's the girl from The Social Network," but like most people would be like, I don't even know if I would have recognized it, because it's such a disappearance in the role. Like I feel like her, she has a very European face, and I feel like that kind of comes through. Like when you look at the movie poster, when you just kind of look at her, like I feel like that really comes through. After seeing this, it's hard to picture any other, well-known actress doing this. Like those people that you listed off, like I can't picture it. I can understand why anybody would want the role, and it speaks to Fincher as a director, because like nothing about this role is like overly like, oh, this is just gonna be nice, easy, performance. Like there's a lot of nudity from her shown, makeup, the piercings is like very unique hairstyling, right? That most conventional actresses would not, wear. So it just speaks a lot to the quality of Fincher's work, that people are just like, no, I'll do anything to work with you. Like, I don't care. And again, it's like, yeah, if we had a Brett Ratner doing this, who's playing Elizabeth, who's going through that to work on a Brett Ratner set?
Not many people.
Yeah, no one's gonna care as much. They did a sequel to this in 2018, which I was mentioning earlier. It was more of like a sequel reboot. And you'll love this part. It was directed by the guy who did the Evil Dead remake, which you loved. And Claire Foy was from like The Crown, was in the role of Elizabeth Slander. And apparently, I haven't seen it, but this movie has a terrible reputation.
I didn't even know another movie came out.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it bombed at the box office, and like nobody gave a shit. It was just like a sequel that like everyone was like thinking like, shouldn't you just have Rooney Mara back in the role and like everything like that? And
it's like because she's not going to go through it to work with the guy who did the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, and like as much as I personally like the Evil Dead remake, when you go from that guy, from Fincher to that guy,
yeah,
you're gonna get a little bit of a drop off right there. And I think that like it's not as much care. And apparently, from what I've heard, the sequel that he made is more of like an action movie than this is more of like a
thriller. This
thriller.
is a straight mystery thriller. And when I was saying like it actually made me want to read the book. I think Fincher does a great job of showing what would be a chapter of a book. Especially when Craig gets to the cottage and starts filing through, and just the way that he's poring over, because a lot of this movie is just like staring at maps and words and books and like running through it, or like a computer screen like that's mostly what this, like a lot of the visuals of this movie takes up. And Fincher finds a way to just make it compelling, and it's not surprising at all. Just the way he's able to pace it, like from my stories of him, are just in terms of his meticulous attention to detail on set. It's like he sees the vision and he has it, and you just fully put your trust into him.
He's very Kubrickian in that way, where he also does like 100 takes for his movies and stuff like that. Some actors definitely couldn't go through that, but pretty much you break through your actors to the point where they get the central performance that he needs right there. So it must have been tough at this point. I mean, some people definitely don't like that style. I mean, like Jake Gyllenhaal apparently in Zodiac hated the fucking fact that he had to go through all these takes. And I get it. I'd be fucking part of this too. As an actor, I was like, I'm doing this again? God fuck damn it.
Yeah, you hate it during, but then when you see the final result and you remember all the other takes, you probably get it more. When a film just comes out that's that complete, like, and I don't think someone like Rooney Mara, for all the hoops she had to jump through just to get this part, and granted it's a breakout role for her at that time too, so it's not it's not like she was at the status of like being a relatively well-known actress at this point. I think that makes a difference in terms of being like, yes, I'll jump through these hoops, but I think for she jumped through all these hoops. What's 100 takes, really?
Yeah, not that much. I mean, it's Fincher was smart in the fact that he cast an A-lister in the role of Michael Blomkvist and Daniel Craig. So it's like, okay, then I can go with a more like unknown actress, essentially. Which Rooney Mara was. Because if it was two A-listers, it would have been like, this is just some random star-driven film.
Yeah, and it was a wise casting decision. I think we should kind of talk about the mystery of it. So Harriet, of the what's the Venkman? What are
the
Wagner family? She died when she was 16. Or so we're told, and the patriarch of the house, played by Christopher Plummer, Henrik, has been devastated since then. It lost the business, right? So it brings him on there to investigate. And, he's helped by Martin Wenger, his nephew, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård. Let me ask you, when you were first introduced to him, what was your take on him? Because I got it was a mystery, so you kind of had to start looking in all the places.
Introduced Stellan?
Yeah.
I thought that immediately, this is a little bit creepy right here. This guy is a little bit dumb. I think that Fincher isn't interested in the mystery of this. I think he's more interested in the procedural aspect of it.
I think he's a little interested in the mystery of it, because I think he's, I don't think Fincher's dumb. I don't think he would abandon his artistic integrity, but I think he knows, like, okay, Sony's giving me $90 million. Like, there has to be some kind of mystery in this. He was one of like he was kind of like the one that I thought it was either he did it or she was alive. That was kind of my thought, and I turned out to be right.
Yeah.
Kind of in both parts. So as they're unveiling more of these documents, it turns out that Martin's father, who we were told just died of a drunken accident, was actually killed by Harriet, and Harriet killed him because he was sexually abusing her, and then Martin took over and started sexually abusing her, and then Harriet was smuggled off the island to get away from it, and was living in London as her cousin, under a different name. And I think the reveal of Stellan Skarsgård of Martin as the bad guy, if you didn't know and it was just this mystery for you, I think comes off really well.
Yeah.
The
reveal is fun.
The connections between the pictures and all the other girls that were murdered, really fun. And then that scene where Craig was investigating the house, and Martin comes back, and then he's trying to get away, kind of gets caught, gets invited back to the house. It was so tense.
It's a great scene of just like both characters know that the other character knows, and to an extent. I mean, and if Daniel Craig leaves the house, it's just like, well, then I know that you know, or something like that. So why don't you be polite? Why don't you take the coffee or whatever it was to drink and stuff like that?
Yeah, that was his perspective, and then it brings him down to his basement where he kills and tortures girls. Martin does. He was taking off he ripped off his shirt, was like untying his pants, and he was like, I've never done this to a man before. But I think the interesting thing, because it's a killer reveal, right? Like this is the killer. And then when Martin goes, so what did you find? What did you find? And Daniel Craig literally is in a neck brace, hung up by chains with a plastic bag over his face. Really demented stuff, really sick stuff, and saying it was you who killed her. And the way he grabs her and goes, what do you mean? I didn't kill her. I did not kill her. I loved her. And it's like, oh,
there's a lot more to unpack right here.
It was a great twist at that moment, because after that moment the movie kind of I felt like rapidly concluded. It felt like after that moment it was like they kind of shortened the scenes. It was almost like the one note he got from the studio was like, this has to be under 3 hours, because it comes in at a whopping 159 minutes. That's the runtime of the movie, so he got it just under. It felt like there could have been more to it.
You definitely feel that, obviously, I mean, that twist was from the novel, but you could have easily had an adaptation of this where they're just well, we just simplify this and make Stellan Skarsgård the killer right here.
Yeah. No, I don't think you can, because it's you're adapting a really popular book. You have to keep these plot points, the main plot points have to be in check. Scenes and character interactions that could or couldn't have happened, that nerds of books will argue about. It's it's for pacing. It's when a book has 5 different characters and they kind of get condensed into one in a film adaptation, because we don't need 5 different small characters. We could just do it with one guy. I think that was good. Also, the other movie that I saw, so when Martin is torturing Daniel Craig, he's about to kill him. Elizabeth comes down, whacks him in the face with a golf club, and the prosthetics they used to get the broken jaw was chilling, but he runs out, he escapes, and Elizabeth chases him on the motorcycle to kill him. I loved how she asked Mikhail for permission. He's like, do you have permission to kill him? He's like, yeah. After what I just went through, yeah, you can kill him. You can kill him if you want.
It's one of those things that Rooney Mara, her character is so asocial and probably neurotypical, to say the least. But it's almost her just asking hey, I'm not sure about the situation. I think that this is a situation where I probably could kill a guy. Can you please just tell me if I'm right in this situation?
Yeah.
Do I have permission right here? Because we get the vibe that obviously Daniel Craig is really the only person in Rooney Mara's life that has ever shown her like respect and not been like afraid of her or just like, oh, look at this fucking freak and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the way he like introduces it, she take because this is right after she had been raped, or relatively thereafter, and when he knocks on her door unexpectedly, she goes back in and grabs her taser because she thinks this guy like wants something of her, and he's like, "Listen, I have a proposition for you. If you have no interest, I'll leave. You'll never hear from me again."
Yeah.
I felt like the one thing that like for me that I didn't love that they hooked up. Just me personally, it kind of makes sense in terms of her character, in terms of like affect like
Well,
kind of confusing, like a paternal
yeah.
instinct for like a sexual companion. But for me, it like I didn't think the movie needed it. I guess for the ending, but like again, like it would have been. I think it would have been fine without it.
I think that the way that in the movie it's just like for her sex isn't really just like a way of like showing intimacy, like because when she first has sex with Daniel Craig, it's just a pragmatic way of helping him calm down from the fucking
Getting
bullet that she
shot,
grazed.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's not more of like a romantic scene of like, oh yeah, it's just she's like, take your fucking pants off, I'm fucking you right now. Yeah, and you're dealing with this, like, you're gonna fucking calm down, okay? And it's just a way of showing of just like how the character reacts to intimacy. That's not her way of intimacy, and we see the intimacy more and more in later scenes, like when they're looking at the computer together, and like he's like caught up against her, and she's like, "Wait, no,
Put your hand back under."
Yeah, put your hand back under my shirt, and just showing just the way she reacts to intimacy, and more so an emotional connection than this physically. She does not really react. In terms of being intimate with somebody.
Yeah, and it makes sense for me. It was just one of those where I didn't think it added anything. I didn't think the ending added some kind of like metaphor. It was just like, oh, I thought he was my boyfriend and he's not, so I'm gonna throw away the gift and drive away. Like that's kind of what I just took it as. And it also, I the one thing I did to see was like she did the background check on him. So the first thing she says is like, well, he's been sleeping with his boss at the magazine. It ended his marriage, not hers. Also says a line being like, he sometimes performs cunnilingus, but not enough in my opinion.
Yeah.
That was a funny line. But it was like, from her perspective, he was kind of perfect and didn't realize what his character defect was, which was that he'll sleep around. He doesn't really seem to have a problem with it.
Mhm.
It was one of those things that just for me, it didn't feel like it added anything, but it was a part of the book, and it feels like Fincher probably did a very faithful adaptation. It's one of those things that would have been stripped down in like the PG-13 movie of this. The 2 hour 15 runtime.
Oh god, I mean, yeah, you need to really show like the dark edges of this movie, because I imagine the sanded down version would be awful. I mean, this is a movie that like, while we do obviously like hear about all the terrible stuff and stuff like that, Fincher doesn't go through like the gratuitous thing of like showing flashbacks of like all the different women getting fucking murdered by like Skarsgård or something. We don't need that. This is just information right here, and
it's just information. This is the plot point of what happened. Like, because there are definitely some directors who would have maybe taken pleasure in the flashback of it and just being like, oh, this will get a reaction, this will get a rise out of people, and it's like, no, we don't need that. It's just like, this is the facts, this is the information. We'll have some pictures so you can see how gruesome it was, but outside of that, not gonna really need anything more.
I am a star. I'm a star, I'm a star, I'm a star. I am a big, bright, shining star.
Tommy, who is the star of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Well, it's the girl with the fucking dragon tattoo herself, Rooney Mara. I think that she is really the character that like sticks with you after this movie. I mean, Daniel Craig is good in this movie, but he doesn't do anything that I haven't really seen him do that much before.
Yeah, well, you need a straight man, right? You have
Yeah,
this
exactly.
you have this eccentric character who the book is named after. You and just typically in like most protagonists in a book, a movie, they're usually a bit of a wet blanket. It's usually the other characters that I Star Wars is the perfect example. Like Luke Skywalker is a good character, but he's your typical hero, right? People like
Yeah.
Han Solo more, they like Darth Vader more, they like Princess Leia more, whatever, right? They have the more eclectic characters. You need that, and I think Craig does a great job in that. But yeah, it's a breakout performance for Rooney Mara. It's you can tell that she just really embodied and embraced the character. Christopher Plummer was great. Christopher Plummer was great. Stellan Skarsgård was fantastic. The whole cast was great. It was just, you have two leads in this movie, and it has to be one of the two of them.
I think that Craig was definitely good. And I think that, like you said, like the wet blanket kind of thing makes sense. I mean, apparently George Clooney, Johnny Depp, Viggo Mortensen, and Brad Pitt were all considered for the role too.
I could see George Clooney. Brad Pitt is, he's a great character actor in the body of a leading man.
Yeah, he's too eccentric. Same thing with Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp would be too eccentric. Viggo would be too eccentric. This was actually written by the
did you say Viggo would be too eccentric?
I think he could be. He can be.
No, dude, he's like the perfect, like, yeah. Okay, we're doing 2024. I'll watch a Friday the 13th movie on the podcast, and we do the theatrical cut of Fellowship of the Ring because you have only seen the extended cut, which is an entirely different movie. And we're watching the theatrical cut of Fellowship.
I guess we want to make it, but the Brad Pitt connection. This was written by the guy who also wrote Moneyball, the script. That is.
Oh, yeah, the adaptation. Yeah, that makes sense. With that, but yeah, it's Rooney Mara, absolutely.
Yeah. And we didn't touch upon Christopher Plummer too much, but I mean, like, it's amazing to think that he was good in this movie. He definitely did his role, but it's just amazing to think about how insane. I think his most notable decade was probably the last decade of his life in terms of performing as an actor.
For people our age, yeah, but
well, not even that. But I mean, obviously, Sound of Music is very and stuff like that, and
iconic. Yeah,
John Barrymore, to say the least. And but the fact that he was in a Ridley Scott movie, he was on fucking this movie, he was in Knives Out and all this stuff. He has probably the best last decade of performance of any actor, I'd say, in your elderly at this stage.
Yeah, I think it's hard to sometimes say what is or what isn't big because for most of these movies, this is a great movie. 50 years from now, Tommy, this is gonna be a movie that nerds like us around our age are gonna shuffle up and be like, wow, this is a great movie. I didn't even know this exists, because it's not gonna be on a top 10 of the decade list that people go down. And it's that that's just the truth of the situation here. I feel like it's not fair to say that it's not, because I'm looking at his credits here and he's in a lot of movies, and it's the way star power works is you either have it and you lose it, or you have it and you keep it. So I feel like you're kind of discrediting work that we haven't seen, whether or not it is good or not.
That's true. To be fair, I haven't seen a lot of his stuff, but I think overall, I when you just take that whole decade run,
it's a good decade run.
I can't think of another actor in his 80s that had a better run.
It's a good listen. It's a good run. Maybe De Niro.
Yeah, could it be up there?
Say what you will about De Niro. It's been leading performances. Plummer's been side character.
Yeah, you have The Irishman, you have The Killers of the Flower Moon, and you also have The War of Grandpa and Bad Grandpa.
Well, De Niro has a lot of bad investments, and you can tell by his filmography post Meet the Parents that he's a lot of them were just kind of paychecks for him, But the Killers and The Irishman show you he can still bring it. Are you ready for the shortest Muppet segment we've ever done?
Are you ready, comedy partner? Waka waka.
Tommy, would the girl with the dragon tattoo work as a Muppet movie? No.
No, but I will say this. I do remember the time I did look up this on YouTube. This movie came out the same year that the Muppets Jason Segel movie came out, and they did do a parody trailer of the girl with the dragon tattoo in the marketing of this movie, of that movie. So there is a little bit thing where, like, I don't know, I could see like a quick, like, very G-rated parody of Miss Piggy and like a fucking mohawk or something like that. That'd be fucking hilarious. But this movie's way too dark for straight Muppet adaptation.
This ain't Muppet Disney. I'm on your side here. This ain't Muppet adaptation material here. Please hire us. Review time, Tommy. Give us your score out of 5.
So I think this is a really engaging movie. Like you said, it's 3 hours, but didn't really feel it. I think Rooney Mara just gives an amazing performance right here. Daniel Craig is fun in this movie. And it just really envelops you in its world. I'm gonna go for it at 5. This is a fun first watch, and I feel like I could definitely rewatch this again.
It definitely feels like a movie that's gonna have more to it on a rewatch. I'm echoing your sentiments. 4 to 5, just great movie. Definitely one that I could even see like increase on a rewatch, where just more and more of the details kind of stick in your face. Fincher's a master for a reason, and you just fully see this on display here in a 3-hour epic. It's crazy too, is because like I was kind of like, all right, it's time to move on, because we like to keep the podcast under an hour, and I was like, I feel like there's still so much we didn't even talk about in this movie. Like, I think that's the crazy thing about it, is like we talked for 50 minutes about this movie, and I feel like we kind of just shoveled under the surface there. Didn't even break it down. Definitely watch this movie. Just note that there will be some visceral stuff that you'll have to watch. That's fine, but it's important. It's important stuff. It's not there just to surprise you or shock jock you.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous in any way.
Well, I would say the rape sequence is a little gratuitous, but like any rape is, but yeah. Tommy, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
So thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow us on social media. That's at Seen It Pod. That's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and occasionally Threads.
You still do that?
Still, I think I haven't posted in a couple weeks, but we'll see what it is.
It's time.
I think it's time to retire the Threads. But anyways,
I told you that. I told you that when you started this a couple months ago.
Yeah, but anyways, leave us a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, really helps us out. And be on the lookout. I guested on a couple podcasts recently, Film versus Film. I talked about The Exorcist Believer, and Film Trace. I end up talking about Mad Max Fury Road and The Purge, a movie that is all about the concept, and the movie itself sucks. But anyways, be on the lookout for those 2. So thank you guys so much for listening, and yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week.